Greetings and bienvenue Midnight Crew. Tonight's broadcast will be slightly different from others. As many of you have been made aware of from the comment section, a member of our community has passed away. Ryan, or Witch Doctor, or simply Doc on the Discord. Ryan had been a member of this community since nearly the beginning. For the last few months he has commented on every video. He had always stayed positive. He gave updates on his life and was there on the Discord whenever anyone needed someone to talk to. He is survived by his wife and his son. So, tonight's video is dedicated to him. I present to all of you stories from his home state of Texas.
Well, I was born and grew up in a house in Dallas-Fort Worth, Texas. As far as I've ever been able to find out, it was built sometime in the 60s or 70s. It was also a really weird house, and by that I mean the windows were all very weird sizes and none of them matched. There was this funky overhang that went down on either side in an A shape beyond the roof. The master bedroom was upstairs, so it was kind of backward. The living room had this insanely high ceiling, and the stairs had a cupboard. There was a room with an entire wall that was a massive sliding glass door that we called the playroom, and there were bizarre nooks and crannies that seemed to lead nowhere. For example, in one of the two walk-in closets in my sister's room, on one side was a tiny 2-by-2-foot door with a narrow crawl space that led precisely nowhere. Since I lived in this house for 12 years, there's a lot to tell. My stupid parents were too stubborn to nope the fuck out of there, so we just stuck around to be haunted as fuck all those years. First off, that crawl space in the closet? It had weird boxes and items left over from the previous owner. Just old crap. I don't even remember what any of it was. My sister crawled into the tiny space to see what was in there once. She came out screaming at the top of her lungs, and to this day has never told anyone what happened there. All of us kids heard our names whispered right up against our ears at night. There were strange lights that would appear under the doors, float through the house, or float just outside the windows at night. You could hear footsteps walking up and down the stairs and through the house at random. Voices would whisper indeterminate nonsense audible to the naked ear at random times. Shit was fucking terrifying. My parents went full-on denial mode, but my mom was scared as fuck. My mom did eventually admit she heard the voices too, but then went back into full-on denial mode. She took sleeping pills every night to get to sleep, and had the worst possible thing she could have, a white noise generator. I'd walk in there as a little kid after having terrifying nightmares or whatever, and at times, whispers and growls would come out of the white noise machine. Needless to say, I never went into her room again at night. I used to wander the house in the middle of the night for no apparent reason. I saw shadow figures all the time, as did my sisters. I could never sleep at night. When I did sleep, I thrashed. I used to do these creepy rhythmic movements or whisper things in my sleep, which I'd be told about when I woke up. I'd always rock, swing an arm or leg back and forth like a pendulum, rhythmically shake my head side to side in a no motion, and frequently could be heard whispering, no, 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 with each beat. By the way, I'm fine, and I don't really have any memory of anything happening to me in particular, other than recurring nightmares and night terrors as a kid. But they didn't really make a lot of sense, so I don't know. My dad had a ham radio for a while. Not long after he got it, it would turn itself on and start shrieking, whispering, squelching or growling in the middle of the night. Being the stoic mofo he was, he just unplugged it and said nothing about it. Then it kept doing it. While unplugged, he just eventually quietly moved it to the garage and, again, said nothing about it. It could still be heard making the occasional faint noise from the fucking garage. I was often chased and attacked, grabbed, pushed over, scratched, bruised. This thing followed me around. I was out swimming with my sisters and several times, something invisible yanked me by the left heel. Always that heel for some reason, into the water trying to drown me. I'd come up screaming. It did it to my sisters too. Several times while we were playing in the backyard, we found weird shit back there. There were buried items littering the yard. An old plastic watering can, a couple of black garbage bags, weird shreds of blue tarp, and a few broken metal items under the shed. This is going to sound crazy, but a few times we found random bones buried in the dirt that we never told anyone about because we were stupid kids. Looking back, the bones I remember finding appeared to be some kind of ribs. I'm hoping someone was just eating pork ribs and tossed them out at random or something, in redneck Texan fashion. But it definitely bugs me. My mom would wait until my dad left for work and call over pastors and church deacons and shit, trying to get anyone to exorcise that fucking house. Nothing worked. And I mean nothing. She would go to churches we weren't members of, just sort of look them up and call up the pastors, basically begging anyone to come help us. I don't think she ever admitted to my dad that she'd been calling these pastors over. I think my dad was the main force behind this unspoken, you saw nothing, rule we had going on. In the end, after my dad passed away of a heart attack in the middle of the night one night, my mom decided to move us to a new house, thank fuck. We had a really hard time selling the house. More than once, potential buyers stopped right at the doorstep, took one look inside, and said, "I feel weird about this place." Then they'd GTFO immediately and never call the realtor again. The realtor was a family friend, so she told us all this. She was a very sweet, naive Christian lady who didn't believe in demons or anything, but after that, she admitted she thought maybe the house was possessed. There are rumors that people who've lived in the house since then have been fucked up families. But that's about all I know. I would not live in that house again if you paid me $1 million a month for it.
Spooky Texas thread. No El Paso, every time. If you want to feel spooky vibes, drive down Ascension Boulevard at night, no abandoned houses, or anything, just pure desert, but there's a chance you can see something weird. There's a story. You can find Texas ghost legends for each city from a site called Shadowlands, of a headless monk that rides a donkey who supposedly shows up down that road, but that same legend covers most of the Southwest. My mom swears after one night coming home from a friend's house in Horizon City that she saw a regular old man walking and even considered to give him a ride for a second. It was late and in the middle of winter, but when she passed him and looked in her rear-view mirror, he wasn't there. My dad also used to tell me some pretty creepy stories from when he lived in the projects in the Lower Valley as a kid. Don't remember any really well cause it's been a while, but can confirm that side of town is fucked. I lived there for a year right by some canals and saw shadow people for the first time there, saw a weird as fuck trick in my bathroom mirror, was just checking out my pupils when a bright ring of gold/blue appeared around it out of nowhere, scared the fuck out of me and hasn't happened since. Had someone/thing scream, tonight, in my right ear when I was trying to sleep, and would hear knocking almost every single night from 12-ish to 3 a.m., in sets of 3. This was in 2012, so the idea wasn't born from The Conjuring and was actually more annoying than spooky after a while. I think that area had some kind of opening for demons or something cause 3 old men were found right next to our place throughout that year, all in the same exact area. It was like someone just stuffed them into the empty gutter and left. The cops never came around and questioned us either. That was the weirdest part. Not even a, "Did you hear/see anything suspicious?" What the fuck?
Cash Landrum Incident, 1980. One of the very few UFO cases to result in civil court proceedings. On the evening of December 29th, Betty Cash, Vicky Landrum and Colby Landrum, Vicky's grandson, were driving home to Dayton, Texas after dining out. At about 9 p.m., while driving on an isolated road in dense woods, the witnesses said they observed a light above some trees, but thinking it was an airplane approaching Houston Intercontinental Airport, about 35 miles away, they gave it little notice. A few minutes later on the winding road, the witnesses saw what they believed to be the same light as before, but much closer and very bright. The light, they claimed, came from a huge diamond-shaped object, which hovered at about treetop level. The object's base was expelling flame and emitting significant heat. Cash stopped the car, though Vicky Landrum, a born-again Christian, believed she was witnessing the second coming of Christ, telling her grandson that Jesus would not hurt them. The two women went outside to investigate the object, but got back in the car due to the Landrum's grandson becoming frantic. The witnesses said the heat was strong enough to make the car's metal body painful to the touch. Cash said she had to use her coat to protect her hand from being burned when she finally re-entered the car. When she touched the car's dashboard, Landrum's hand pressed into the softened vinyl, leaving an imprint that was evident weeks later. Investigators later cited this handprint as proof of the witness's account. At some point, the object rose up into the sky, and the witnesses claim black helicopters approached and surrounded it. After the UFO and helicopters left, Cash took the Landrums home, then retired for the evening. That night, they all experienced similar symptoms, though Cash to a greater degree. All suffered from nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, generalized weakness, a burning sensation in their eyes, and feeling as though they'd suffered sunburns. However, Cash eventually had to be hospitalized after her condition deteriorated such that patches of her hair and skin started to fall away. The Landrums also sought medical attention, though their conditions were less severe. A radiologist who examined the witnesses' medical records for Mutual UFO Network wrote, "We have strong evidence that these patients have suffered secondary damage to ionizing radiation. It is also possible that there was an infrared or ultraviolet component as well." However, some contend that, although the symptoms were similar to those caused by ionizing radiation, the rapidity of onset was only consistent with a massive dose that would have meant certain death in a few days. Since all of the victims lived for years after the incident, some suggest the cause of the symptoms was some kind of chemical contamination, presumably by an aerosol. Vicky Landrum telephoned a number of U.S. government agencies and officials about the encounter, and eventually, MUFON began research on the case. Due to the helicopter's presence, identified as Chinooks, the witnesses presumed that at least one branch of the United States Armed Forces had witnessed the object. In 1982, Lieutenant Colonel George Saran of the Department of the Army Inspector General began the only thorough formal governmental investigation into the supposed UFO encounter, but could find no evidence that the helicopters the witnesses claimed to have seen belonged to the U.S. Armed Forces. Eventually, Cash and Landrum contacted their U.S. senators, who suggested that the witnesses file a complaint with the Judge Advocate Claims Office at Bergstrom Air Force Base. With an attorney taking on the case pro bono, the case wound its way through the U.S. courts for several years. Cash and Landrum sued the U.S. government for $20 million. On August 21, 1986, a U.S. District Court judge dismissed their case.
The ghost face of University of Texas Medical Branch at Galveston. The likeness of a human face, specifically, the likeness of a William H. Bigfoot Wallace, that first appeared on the outer fourth-story wall of Building No. 71, Ewing Hall, of the University of Texas Medical Branch campus in the 1980s, shortly after the construction of the building. After the appearance of the face, the university had the wall in question sandblasted. However, soon after, the face had appeared once more, this time on the third floor. The image was sandblasted again, only for it to reappear on the second floor, after which the university ceased its efforts to remove it. The face is purported to have manifested as a result of a land dispute, in which said Bigfoot Wallace was entitled to a grant of land which the state of Texas refused to yield, with the face only appearing once the state of Texas erected a building on the parcel of land claimed by the then-dead claimant. There also seems to be a story of some nurse who was driving trying to see the face, but her inattention at the wheel caused her to dive into the adjoining marshland and drown.
X, I have a recent Skinwalker encounter that I'd like to get off my chest. Now, I'm not the best writer and have spent some time pre-writing this to ensure the details are all included as well as relevant pictures. I'm going to forewarn you, it's not really that exciting. No one died, and for that I'm fortunate. Be me, 24 years old. Biologist currently finishing up PhD at a top Baptist university in Central Texas. I've been in the state for a few years now, however I originally came from up north. I've made it more than halfway through the program and are finishing up my research projects in preparation to graduate with my PhD. My research focuses on mosquito-borne illnesses, and I intend to utilize my PhD and my research interests as a ticket to direct commission as a medical entomologist for the Army. A lot of my research consists of fieldwork. This includes mosquito larva collections. As I conduct a lot of fieldwork, I often find myself in remote places, including state and national parks. Over the last few years I've been collaborating with a former military medical entomologist. The reason I had this encounter was fueled by the collaboration I have with this entomologist. During our collaborative work, I've traveled to almost every state park in Central Texas. This includes Fort Parker, which is handily located west of the Piney Woods region of Texas. The reason I mention this is that I've heard of other cryptid stories, including skinwalkers in East Texas, and featuring Parker was a few hours from Piney Woods, where another X poster encountered one. I never saw anything weird up to this point, but believe what I saw was a skinwalker due to the sheer proximity to the Piney Woods and the short time it would take to get there. Now this day, I wasn't in the Piney Woods or featuring Parker, however had traveled to Meridian State Park. Meridian is in central, eastern Texas, south of Dallas and considered the heart of Bosque County. It was around 3 hours from Fort Parker and 4 or 5 from the Piney Woods region. I was tasked with doing some mosquito larva surveys to see what species were present, and this had become a routine activity, so I thought nothing of it. The park was eerily deserted for a Sunday morning, with a few campsites set up, and a few park rangers working. I quickly signed in at the ranger station, showed my collection credentials and was given a parking sticker receipt for my car windshield. The weather was quite good, with a temperature around 74, and partially cloudy skies. I parked my car at one of the parking lots next to the lake, specifically next to Lakeside Campground Premium Shelter 4. I had counted no more than 5 cars, and from memory remember seeing a bunch of Taiwanese tourists. I applied bug spray. As a biologist, I've learned a lot about mosquito-borne illness, tick-borne illness, and I wouldn't be a happy camper to be on the receiving end of any pathogen. I grabbed my rucksack out of my trunk, as well as my collection gear, larval dipper, strainer, Eppendorf tubes, 50 ml conical tubes. Now I'm usually legally carrying when I go into state parks. This due to being from the north originally and having to deal with predators. Now I'm no commando and don't have a Chinese girlfriend SKS, but I do have a rusty 9mm Smith & Wesson M&PM 2.0. However, on this day, I chose not to bring it because of the humidity being pretty bad. My original plan was to hike the Bosque Trail and cross over onto the Shinnery Ridge Trail, sampling any streams I passed. I started out on the Civilian Conservation Corps Bridge 6, and made my way north on the Bosque Trail. It was pretty amazing at first. The forest was alive with insect activity, bird calls and a slight breeze which rustled the trees. The Bosque Trail at this point crosses over into the smaller Little Forest Junior Trail, which is about 0.8 miles long. I stopped at a wildflower field as it was the first time I visited the park and I wanted to see some of the sights. The field was mostly dead. the wildflowers trampled, withered and covered in weeds. I reluctantly continued along the trail and saw maybe one other person the quarter mile I was on the junior trail. He asked what I was doing and I briefly explained why I was carrying all the gear. We parted ways and I eventually made it back on the Bosque Trail. After a while I stopped at B-Ledge, which is a rock formation overlooking Lake Meridian. It was an amazing spot, so I decided to take a picture there which I could use for Facebook or whatever. Now as I left the ledge, the weird things started to happen and they continued to intensify as I went down the trail. A quarter mile from the B-Ledge I started to encounter large objects blocking the trail path. Several logs seemed to have been dragged onto the trail. Additionally, fallen trees were spread out along the next quarter-mile stretch. Crossing over them was quite difficult and there were quite a lot of them. This continued for several hundred feet until the trail steeply went up the side of the mountain. It seems that at some point the rangers had carved out stone stairs into the rock face. However, they were deteriorated and at this point hard to traverse. The trail had a long railing made from what looked to be an outdoor power cord. However, due to county vid, I didn't use it. The disrepair continued to intensify as I made my way deeper into the trail. At the start, the trail markers were shiny metallic rectangles with a blue indicator nailed to trees. However, they soon transitioned into just blue spray paint on the bark. I constantly kept getting lost on the trail. Now I'm not a person who gets lost easily. I've had a lot of hiking experience and consistently went on collections in various state parks. Upon reaching the first stream, I crouched to unpack my ruck and started to collect larvae using the dipper. The water wasn't that deep, it wasn't flowing and had become stagnant with a deep brownish color. Using my larval dipper, I collected water and strained it for mosquito larvae. I made several collections and ultimately found several species, including Culex pipiens quinquefasciatus, a very common southern species. After taking my samples, I carefully packed my rucksack to ensure the samples wouldn't be disturbed during transit. From experience, if it's too shaky, they won't be able to float at the water's surface and breathe and ultimately die. It is much easier to identify an adult mosquito versus a larva, and I don't want to have to identify 100 dead larvae. As I continued to venture forth, the trail started to get worse and worse. It reached a point where I became pissed off and thought to myself, why the heck does it look this way, etc.? What are the rangers doing, etc.? I started to take GPS-tagged pictures, which I could pass off to the rangers for trail repair operations. At this point, I doubted that any common person, let alone a weekend hiker, would be able to successfully navigate this trail, and thought it posed a significant safety risk. Continuing onward down the trail, I reached a dense area of woods. It seems that out of nowhere, the trail enters a thick brush and stays in it for quite a while. The thick brush had minimal undergrowth, but darkened the trail due to the thick canopy created by the overlapping trees. Now I am a religious person. Thinking back, I should have realized that darkness ultimately relates to evil and should have been forewarned of continuing. Entering the dense woods seems to have transformed everything around me, not physically but in a sense where it felt different. The bird calls disappeared, the insects were silent and the trees were not rustling anymore. Slightly alarmed, I continued onward. As I was approximately an eighth of the way through the Bosque Trail and had several more streams needed to be collected which could take several hours, it was 1 p.m. at this point. After a while I felt like I was being watched, and I started to get very anxious. Now I'm not a perfect person, but I had a really strong feeling I was being watched. I usually don't get feelings like this, so when I experience them it's usually wise to trust them. I scanned the area and didn't see anything, so I continued onward. There was still no noise, so I increased my pace so that I could get out of this creepy area quickly. I soon reached a second stream and decided to sample it. Like the first, the water was dark and stagnant. I unpacked my gear and quickly worked to collect samples. I found a few varied insect larvae, including several mosquito larvae and several dragonfly larvae. I removed the dragonfly larvae as they kill mosquito larvae, and if I had left them, all the mosquitoes would have been dead before I returned to campus. As I was packing up, I started to smell a stagnant copper smell. Now it is hard to explain, but the best explanation is a mixture of blood, roadkill and death. I'm having a difficult time writing this next statement, but I'll give it my best. As a man of science, I've learned a lot about the biology of living creatures. I've been able to extract mosquito blood meals and determine the blood meal host species using mitochondrial DNA. I've genetically edited and made transgenic mosquitoes, with edited receptors. I believe in a rational explanation for everything, as I've experienced a structured order to nature. At first I freaked out a little bit internally, but had a strong belief that some armadillo decided to die near the trail and his decomposing corpse was responsible for the smell. Now the trail was still in a thick part of brush, so not seeing a corpse wasn't too alarming. I continued down the trail heading toward the northern bend in the Bosque Trail, which can be seen on the trail map. Upon reaching the northern bend, I stopped for a few seconds. I still felt like I was being followed, but couldn't smell the stagnant copper anymore, so I partially relaxed, looked at the map, then continued onward, southwestern down the trail. After a short while the smell returned. I was far enough from the stream that it would be very unlikely that it wafted this far. This startled and concerned me, as it isn't normal for so many corpses to be near trails, and I've never experienced something like this before. I reached a small bridge and the thick forest started to clear out into where I could see for a short distance between the trees. I stopped for a minute to look at the map and my phone, as the trail had sorta dissipated. The bridge had a small stream running underneath it, but I reluctantly still felt awkward, so I didn't sample it. While looking for where the trail continued toward, I found a large black object standing in my peripheral vision, more or so 300 meters away. My eyes adjusted to it and the image focused into what looked like a person standing, 6 feet tall. However, the face was wrong and it was covered in fur, not clothing. I looked away for a second and looked back and the object disappeared. I started to internally freak out, but soon found where the trail started back up and the object was standing in the opposite direction when I saw it. I notepad.jpg down the trail, and ensured I kept my eyes scanning near where I saw the object. My biggest concern at this point was something was following me, possibly a large animal, and I would rather not make the 6 o'clock news. While continuing down the trail, the smell still lingered, and I saw it again, this time around 300 feet away again. This time I noticed that it was some sort of animal. I assumed a deer was standing on its back feet. I stopped to observe it and noticed it was walking on 2 feet, very awkwardly, and the fur seemed to have large missing spots. I knew it wasn't human, as humans don't walk that way, nor if injured walk that way. It had a very primal animalistic walk. I blinked and at some point it disappeared. I got really spooked and almost started sprinting down the trail. I covered a mile of harsh terrain in about 5 minutes. I made it to a clearing where I could see across the lake and toward where I had parked. At this point I could hear something from the direction I came in. It seemed to be slowly getting louder. "Bill, where'd go? Bill, go you." My mind pieced together that it was saying, "Bill, where'd you go?" I have no clue who Bill is, and the voice didn't sound human. It's as if an animal's voice box was being forced to pronounce human words. It sounded raspy and primal. This absolutely scared the ever-living shit out of me. I kept a steady pace down the trail. I kept scanning my surroundings and cursing at myself for not bringing my pistol. The smell intensified, and I'm pretty sure it was following me closely. I did due diligence to ensure I wasn't being outmaneuvered or flanked. Whatever it was hunting me, and I had around 70 pounds of gear on me and was ultimately a slow-moving target.
I eventually made it to the eastern campsites marked with a picnic bench on the map and felt a sigh of relief. I'm not sure if these things hunt in open terrain, but I would have a good view of it if it left the tree line. To my surprise, there was an older middle-aged lady camped out there. She had a dog with her, and the dog was going absolutely nuts barking. At first I thought I spooked the dog, but after looking at it for a while, it was barking at something in the tree line, not me. After a while it whimpered and ran away from the tree line and toward the lady's tent, and she called his name. Let's say Fido because I can't remember it. I socially distanced a hello wave, and continued to awkwardly run down the trail carrying my gear. It was quite peaceful and quiet for a short distance down the trail, and eventually I reached a road. I felt guilty about how that lady was probably going to get murdered by whatever that was, and felt fortunate I escaped. About 30 minutes later I stumbled out on a Forest Service road. The trail seemed to wind onto the road and just abruptly end. Now from my recollection, this is the road on the southwestern corner of the map, which parallels the trail. The smell started to come back and I started to panic again. I heard, "Where'd Fido?" which really freaked me out because whatever was saying that was mirroring the lady. Now the trail didn't have a good indicator of where it started back up. I was freaking out as the noise was increasing. I started to head, I presume, north on the road, and eventually figured out it was the wrong way as it didn't follow the contour of the road on the map. I double time it back and see a park ranger truck driving down the road toward me. I flagged him down and asked him where the Bosque Trail started back up. To my surprise, the trail actually backs onto the road, where you have to walk down the road following spray-painted dots, and eventually it goes back into the woods. I'm sure the ranger knew what was up because he was very brief and told me to stay on the trails. I asked him if there were any predators in the woods which I should worry about. His eyes got real big and he told me to stay on the trails, not to deviate, and to probably call it a day. He took off speeding down the road and I awkwardly sprinted south down the road, and eventually found the trail again. The whole time, in the distance I heard, "Where trail back start?" The fucker was mocking me and was stalking me while I talked to the ranger. I hauled my ass down the trail and eventually reached a clearing. This clearing being the southern bend of the trail where it curves off east into a straight line. This area was quite open, almost reminded me of a rice field as there were swamps on either side of the trail, and it was elevated on a grass mound 8 feet up and 10 feet wide. I continued in a sprint across the mound and reached the end of the trail where it loops to my car. When I reached the bend which led toward where I parked, I stopped and looked back. It was standing on the mound near the forest opening, 200 feet, just staring at me. It wasn't on the 2 legs anymore, but on all 4s. The face looked honestly like the descriptions I've seen on here. It was sunken in, red dots in black eyes, etc. It also seemed to be smirking. I booked it to my car, threw my ruck in the trunk, and literally did not stop till I reached campus. Now, I'm not sure if it's real. I had packed a good meal, lots of water, and wasn't dehydrated. I'm in good mental health, or as best I can be in a PhD program. It wasn't a deer, a bear, or anything that I've seen before. Since then I've not wanted to go in a woods, or collect, rightfully so, without another person. I'm sorry that this was uneventful, but I really wanted to get it off my chest.
Now, most of the stuff here is fake, however this isn't. Be me. 13 years ago, 13 years old, Central Texas. Camping by myself, scout requirement. Leave at about 7 a.m., get to the campsite, and set up. Have a whole day ahead of me. Now, in my town, a 13-year-old with a Mosin rifle in the woods alone on a normal Tuesday. Hear a scurry in the underbrush. Accidentally powder rabbit.mp4. Now that I have no meat left on the rabbit, I now have to look for more animals. It's 3 hours of hiking earlier. It's dark by now. It's also cold. Go back to camp, decide to not eat tonight. Camp box is splintered, tent is still fine. See a smallish animal, and take a shot at it. It stands up, and it's like 7 feet tall. It can't be human, as no one in my town is that tall, or ugly. It was eating all of my oranges, and I wanted my oranges. Mag dump as fast as I can with a Mosin. Turns out, there's a hunter shack 1 mile away from where I was. Hike over to it and every window is broken, the door is broken, and the sheriff is there. They think I did it. The thing I shot at watched and followed me there. All of my shots missed. That was the scariest night ever for me, and the only I made it out with was my Mosin.
Be me and friend. Live in a tiny town of maybe 2,000 at the time. In our music phase sophomore year. Friend has a garage to jam out. Hear yells coming from backyard. WTF. Sounds like a deaf person trying to speak. Gets so bad no one wants to party. Continues for weeks. Friend's dad is going crazy from it. Wakes up in the middle of night to yell back. I'm so sorry, I can't help you, he yells. My friend and I listen closely. It is saying help me. We freak out and insist on investigating. Neighbors behind the house have a cage. Cage blocked by plywood. Can't see it. Approach it and the yelling stops. Here's heavy breathing. Fuck that. Run back to the house and call the cops. Cops show up. Old Mexican couples insist they have nothing. They're witches with no electricity. Continues. Insist on cops. People move out and never hear it again. Till this day, we have no idea what the fuck was going on.
Marfa Lights. I was driving up from Big Bend National Park towards Guadalupe National Park. This brought me very near Marfa, Texas. I was only car on the road. It was about 3 a.m. All of a sudden a light appears in the sky very far in the distance. It was just a small orb upon first sight. It slowly descends until it is on the horizon directly in front of my car. At this time I was about 10 miles away from it. At this point I am nervous, but I told myself it could be anything, so I keep going. The light remains in the distance as I travel another 2 or 3 miles. I start thinking about turning around, but I was in the middle of nowhere, and low on gas. I didn't have enough gas to go back to the last town 50 or so miles back south. At this point, I start freaking out because the light starts growing. Then it divides into two, one above the other. Then the 2 lights divide left and right to create 4 lights. The lights appear to grow. I am heading for them still, and they appear to be moving now towards me. I'd say I was about 5 miles away from them at this point. The 4 lights then further divide up, so that now I am staring at a pillar-made orb lights in a 2x8 pattern. They appear to be getting even larger as I head to them. They then start to pulse at what I would say 10-second intervals. At this point I don't know what to do. I figure maybe it is a roadblock, military, aliens, or some kids, or some illegals trying to get me to stop so they can hijack my car. Every scary thought ran through my mind. I can't go back because not much gas left, so I just fucking gun the engine, get up to about 110 miles per hour. As I am coming up to them, they merge row by row into each other until there were only 2, and then those 2 shrunk and faded away completely just as my car was coming up to pass where they would have been. Weirdest shit I've ever seen.
So, pretty simple. Been having the worst creeping feelings of dread the last few days. Stuff has generally been strange. I'm back at my folks' place for a while due to the coof and shit. Had it. Fucked me up, so I'm not as robust as I used to be. posted about this area a while back in a Texas Happenings thread. Folks live across from two ancestral graveyards from the original settlers to this rural region, dating back to before the founding of the Republic. Wondering what's going on around here lately, should I be concerned? Last night we had a wicked moon out, almost full, yellow as snake's blood, and the forest out here seems to be getting up to its old shit. Any light in the area gets drunk up by this dark as Dick's Texas oak. Makes the shadows swim when you look out into the dark. Was light enough to be okay last night though. Tonight however it's pitch black, moon's totally obscured, hasn't risen. You'd think with the new truck stop on the corner, the lights that bug the fuck out of us usually would keep this area lit, but nah. It's still ink outside. If that wasn't enough, dogs have been acting weird all day. I keep having the small one who stays next to me pop up out of dead sleep or grooming herself to glare at a corner, while the others are uncharacteristically whiny. Bringing the bigger one in tonight, she refused to leave her place next to the gate across the acreage for a while, only to finally start coming and then stop dead again halfway, looking over towards our overgrown swamp of a pond. I call her some more and she finally comes, but she bolts the other way around our dog run rather than the direct path into the closed patio to the front door. I kinda brush it off, bring her in and feed her with the other animals. Though the whole time she seems nervous. She wolfs down her food, and when I remember I have to feed the outdoor elderly cats, she bolts past me as I walk out the door into the dark. I try to go and get her back but she's back at that midpoint. She's zoned in on that damn pond again. When I try to be firm and get her to come back, instead she bolts into the semi-shadow of a large oak on our property going damn near invisible. She's tawny-furred. I should see her but, nothing. It's like she vanished in mid-air. I'm kinda freaked out and while I know my eyes are shit, I keep sweeping the area, calling. Can't see or find her. Get the hairs on the back of my neck standing on end. Notice no frogs and the damn dog isn't barking. If it was our boarder in the back, she'd be barking her head off, or rather anyone else. Same for if it's the chickens we keep, but the chickens sleep in their roost at sundown. This dog's too much of a pussy to fuck with snakes either, though at that same twist I'm not going out there to risk a moccasin bite near the pond to get her. At this point I've come back inside, locked the doors, and taken the holy water from the pantry to bless the doorways with 3 shakes of the stuff. My mother and I are Catholic. We've had weird shit happen recently before, where an old camera was yeeted the fuck across the room from the sofa and into the cat box while no one was in the room. I reasoned the thing got flipped by the cats playing and hitting the dresser drawer that was on the couch that the camera was in. It was knocked over, but we remember it being in the center of the sofa, and I don't think the cats could produce enough force leaping on the thing to ever shoot that camera. I tried not to think too deeply about it and just chalk it up as a weird happenstance. Should I be concerned about tonight?
Not mine, but it is about the same stretch of land they are talking about for skinwalkers. It was 1973. I was hitchhiking from New Braunfels to Corpus Christi on Texas 123. It was 2 to 3 in the morning and there was a fog that had settled. It was late and the first 2 cars did not stop, they just kept driving. I understood. It was late, but I was young and dumb and proceeded on. I came up to a bridge and began walking across it. As I did I began to hear the same thing. Pissed. I thought I was hearing things and continued walking. A few minutes later I heard it again. The bridge was long, but I knew I had heard something. I looked down the side to the bridge and was barely able to make out the floor. but there was nothing there. I continued walking and heard it again, and then again. I thought it was just somebody messing with me, perhaps a transient seeking shelter under the bridge. Then I remember thinking, how did they see me and how did they hear me from the other side of the bridge? The sound was emanating from under the bridge. How were they following me from under the bridge? The noise began to get louder as I was nearing the end of the bridge, and then, I heard indistinct voices. Not one but multiple voices. I was dumb, naive. I thought I was brave and bad. So I did what any idiot would do. I began to descend under the bridge. The voices began to move away. So I started walking deeper down. I thought I began to hear laughter, then it dawned on me. They were luring me down. I paused and slowly began to backtrack, and then I heard, "Psst," once again. It was coming towards me. "Psst" is closer still. A heaviness and urgency filled me as I turned to run. "Psst," closer still. The fog got heavier as I began to sprint. "Psst," it had to have been only yards away. My lungs were beginning to burn and I could feel my side beginning to hurt. Light up ahead, an oncoming car, my salvation on the opposite side. To this day I am not sure what he saw. He saw me running and he must have seen what was behind me. His face was in utter disbelief. He slowed down enough to get a better look and then sped away. I was defeated, my muscles began to protest, and then, "Psst," it was already at my back. Just then a semi came out of nowhere. It was coming fast. I took my chances and started flailing my arms. He saw me and began to slow down. Whatever this thing was, the semi seemed to scare it off. I turned around, still moving forward, and saw nothing. There were a lot of lights on the semi and the entire area seemed to be illuminated. He opened the door and I jumped in. Before I closed the door I heard someone from the side in the brush, "Psst," almost. It was guttural and angry. I looked at the driver and asked him, "Did you hear that?" He smiled and said it must be coyotes. "You all right, son? Where you headed?" he asked as he put the rig in gear and slowly lumbered back onto the pavement. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw something. Something angry and big, something I won't describe. Something that should not be. "Corpus, sir, thank you. You don't know what a blessing you are." I wanted to cry. I was scared. But I was alive. I was alive.
First of all, I'm at work, so I didn't really get a chance to pre-write this, even though I know that you'll probably grow impatient waiting for a continuation. That is, of course, if you even take a liking for my story. The house in the picture is where I used to live when all of these things happened. First of all, I was maybe about 9 or 10 when all of this started. I had 3 stepsisters who were my dad's, and my brother who was my mom's, but not my dad's. My dad was a drug lord in the area. He eventually got arrested and my mom decided to split it up, because he got a 15-year sentence. We moved out of our older home and came to this hellhole of a house. My uncle and his family had just gotten kicked out of their house, so they decided to move in with us, and my mom decided it would be easier, because that way we could split the bills and all that shat. Now back to the topic. My stepsisters were absolute assholes all the time, and had a shat ton of dashy friends. The whole mess started when they moved out of the house. My uncle's family shortly occupied my sister's room, and my grandma came to visit, so she had her own room. My mom had a serious drug problem in that time, so she was always angry and arguing with my grandma and us, which is the reason why I think our house always reeked of this nasty tense feel. The air was dense to the point where you felt like you were choking inside. Sometime after my grandma moved in, my mom started to hear noises in the kitchen. By this time, my mom slept in the living room, to avoid being bothered by me, my brother or my grandma. She used to go to my room and spank me because she said I would always trash her makeup, when in reality, I was dead asleep. Sometimes she'd get mad and say me and my brother pulled on her hair, or pushed the sofa to wake her up. We never did. After some time, the noises started getting gradually louder. Really loud. She was always angry, complaining about me and my brother playing pranks on her, or arguing with my grandma about whether or not she was drugged. In a nutshell, before my brother or me ever found out about the shat that happened in my house, the house was already creepy. Once, my mom worked out overnight, and grandma only ever worried about my cousin and my brother, so I was up late playing Tony Hawk on the PS2, which was in the living room. We had 2 conch-shaped sofas, and I would join them together to make a bed. I'd lay there and play all night. But this night, I felt really heavy. I felt a huge presence in my back, a really big stress, like if somebody was there, somebody was watching everything I was doing. It was weird, horrifying. I couldn't bring myself to move, and when I did, I turned towards the door and saw nothing. But even then, I had the really heavy feeling that there was someone or something there, so I turned and looked at the kitchen hall and saw absolutely nothing. Then I heard the door make a huge bump noise and thought it was my mom, so I made a run for it and left the PS2 on. I slammed myself into my bed beside my brother and fell asleep. The next morning, I woke up and saw everything as I left it, and realized my mom hadn't been home since I thought so. I turned on the TV and I saw the PS2 was frozen, and the screen was stuck on the pause menu. The part that creeped me out was that the screen had some huge bars running down, and they seemed to interact with the interface. I thought this was just an error, so I didn't pay it much mind. Nothing else ever happened until my uncle bought my cousin a life-size doll. That's when things started getting fucked up. Hick related. That's how the doll looked, only it was bigger and bigger eyes. Anyways, when they bought my cousin that doll, it was originally in the living room near the TV. She would always play with it and talk to it to the point where I thought she was mentally unstable. Fast forward a few days, my brother and I were watching TV at around 2 or 3 a.m., and the huge motherfucking doll suddenly falls on the floor. I get creeped the fuck out and nope to bed. My brother went ahead and picked it up, laughed at it, probably teased it, and then put it in its place. That same night, I had a really fucked up dream. I was awake in the middle of the night, playing PS2, just like the night I talked about in the last post. But when I turned around, I saw a little girl, about my age. She smiled and told me she wanted to play. She seemed generally innocent, but something was off. Her eyes were dark as fuck. When I accepted to play with her, she turned around and I saw a huge bullet hole in the back of her head. That's when she turned around and looked fucked up and skeletal. That's when I woke up and screamed like hell. My brother asked me what I had dreamt, and he said he couldn't sleep after putting it back in its place, because it kept falling or its hands were dropping. He said it creeped him out, so he decided to go chill in the room. That day we decided something was fucked up, and back then, we didn't have computers in our house, so we walked to the library near Brown High School, and investigated about what we could do if we thought the house was haunted. We read about laying out a candle and a cup of water next to it, and seeing if the ghost or whatever accepted it as a peace treaty or some shat like that. So that night, we did that. We put a cup of water and a candle next to it. The next morning, the cup of water was half empty, and the candle was put out, dropped on the floor. We told my grandma about it, and she said it was probably my mom getting home drunk as fuck and paid it no mind. That day me and my brother were sure it was something, so we decided to look around in the house. Our house had an attic, a rather small one, but an attic nonetheless. We looked in the attic and found a gun. It was old as hell, and surprisingly, it had 3 rounds. I can't say the model of the gun because I have no clue what it is. Anyways, we decided to grab it and keep it a secret from my mom and grandma until we found out what it was completely. That day it was a Sunday, so my mom took my uncle and his family to the flea market, and me and my brother stayed at home looking for shat, specifically in my sister's old room. We looked in the top part of their closet and found a Ouija board. We didn't pay the Ouija board much mind, because we always knew that our stepsisters were fucked in the head. But when we opened the box it was in, the actual board was fucking trashed. I mean trashed to the point where the letters were illegible. Anyways, that day, it was around 5 or 6 in the afternoon and my mom hadn't come back. Grandma was away, and my brother and I were completely alone. We were hearing a shat ton of noise, and decided to turn on the radio to distract ourselves. We were listening to the local rock station, not because we were huge fans or anything, we just had a stupid belief that if we heard rock, it would be louder, and we wouldn't hear anything. We placed the radio near the right window, from my original post, because that was the only place it ever got signal. We were listening to music for a while until I got bored and tried to walk away from the radio. When I got maybe 1 or 2 meters away from it, the radio started making these horrible static noises. I got annoyed as fuck and turned it off. My brother was still shat scared, so I told him we should play PS2 until my mom came back. That day, my mom came back drunk as fuck, so she didn't even pay attention to us, and just walked straight to the sofa to sleep. My grandma came home maybe 30 minutes after her, and they started arguing. This argument was bigger than all of the other arguments. There was screams, pushes, hair pulling, and oh so much more. My mom finally decided that she was sick of it and said she was going to leave, so she stormed out the door, got in her car and drove away. That night I was crying my eyeballs out because I thought my mom had abandoned us, so I couldn't sleep, and neither could my grandma. At around 3 or 4 a.m., I was barely drifting off to sleep, when I heard the door making noise, and I thought mom was home, so I was happy and instantly jumped out of bed and was about to run to the living room. When I was going to run to the living room when my grandma grabbed my arm and said, "SSHH, don't go. It's not your mom. I don't know if it's a burglar or anything, but it's definitely not your mom." So, I got all spooked and went back into my room. My dog started yipping his fucking head off, so I was worried that they would harm him, so I peeked out of the window, and saw something about maybe the size of a 3 or 4-year-old toddler. It was throwing stones at my dog, so I slammed on the window and it turned around to look at me, and I'll never forget the way its eyes looked. They looked shiny as fuck, but dim, it's hard to even explain. After it looked at me, it just dropped the stones and ran towards the alley where we could dump our trash, and I didn't see it again. The next morning, my uncle was mad at me and my brother because we supposedly trashed my cousin's doll. My grandma interrupted his bitching to tell him that she had been watching us all night and we didn't leave the room for jack shat. My mom came back that day in the night, only to sleep and argue again, but nonetheless, she was back. As of that day, and for about 3 or 4 months, nothing new ever happened except that we felt a really heavy presence behind us every time we woke up in the night to go get water. It was all routinely, until the dishes started slamming in the night. The chairs would also move a slight amount, and we would always leave a glass of water for the ghost in the middle of the night, and it was always the same result. My grandma finally ended up believing me and my brother, and told my mom, so we went to visit the house owner and asked her all about it. Anyways, when we visited the house owner, who had a funeral arrangements business in downtown McAllen, she told us that a while ago, a cop rented that house with his daughter. He was outside arguing with the neighbors and had left his gun in the living room, and his daughter shot herself in the head. I immediately felt creeped out as fuck, because I had dreamt with an actual ghost from that place. The house owner said that both the girl and the dad died there. He self-ended shortly after the girl died. She told us to buy some spiritual shat, and to set it on fire and cleanse the whole house at least 3 or 4 times per month as of then. The first time my grandma cleansed the house, I was actually scared. When she wanted to light the spiritual shat, the lighter kept on going off. When she finally managed to light it on, the smoke from it started going towards the walls. It was really messed up, creepy, like if someone was blowing it towards the walls or something. After a few minutes of lighting it, roaches started climbing out of small, really small cracks in the wall, and all headed towards the bathroom. I ruled it out as normal, and thought it was just that roaches don't like smoke. When we finished cleaning the first time, my grandma went to the bathroom, and to our surprise, we didn't see a single roach, on the walls, on the floor, roof, anything. After the whole cleaning, the spoopy shat stopped for about 3 days, until my grandma and mom argued like hell for about 2 weeks straight. During those 2 weeks, the whole heavy ambient started to kick in again, and my grandma constantly took my brother, my cousin and me to the park, just to avoid being in the house. She used to say that the ghost would call her grandma, and even my aunt said she was being called mom, when my cousin was in school. She got freaked the fuck out and left the house and split up, just because of that. One time, my mom said she was taking a bath, and the bathroom door slammed open, while nobody was home. She immediately asked a medium to visit the house, and even the medium couldn't stand 10 minutes in the house without feeling weak and wanting to leave. I said the medium was absolute bullshit, and told my grandma to call her Mexican witch friends over to see what the fuck was going on. It turns out, we had duendes, which is goblins I think. It's a kind of ghoul or ghost or whatever. Mexicans believe in it, and it's basically an entity that feeds on negative energy. But that's not all we had. We also had the little girl's spirit in our house, causing a major racket in the night. Apparently, the girl had grown up without a mother, so she was hoping to find a mom in the women in my home. 3 weeks after that, we saw something digging furiously in the backyard, and woke up and saw our dog strangled, and his chain was dug in the hole that whatever that thing was making. That's when we decided we'd leave the house, but my uncle started acting like a fucking creep, saying he liked it there, and how he felt he had a second daughter now. My uncle acted worse every day. Sometimes he would skip his job just for the sake of being home when everybody else was gone. I never knew why. There isn't really a getting to the bottom of this ending to this story. It has always been creepy as fuck, but there are more stories about shit that happened while I lived in that neighborhood. For example, in the huge empty lot that was in front of my house, a body was washed up by the rain. My backyard was somewhat large, and we had a huge pickup truck in the back. It was tireless, basically just scrap metal with car seats, because even the motor was gone. When we were looking for stuff from the dead people who used to live there, we decided to look inside of that truck. We found a lot of albums of the man with his daughter, but we never found any pictures of the mom. Shortly before moving out, my mom was already in rehab, trying to get her life back into control, and my grandma was helping her. They were starting to get along pretty well, but even then, there was creepy shit going on in the house. The last night we spent there was a living hell. We had already packed up our stuff and we were going to leave the next day, but since we were going to drive a long way, my mom decided it would be better to move out early morning. That night I slept in the living room. The only thing we left connected was the TV, so we could watch it until we drifted to sleep. The TV kept on going to static, the bathroom light was flickering, we had left it on. I felt my throat dry up like a fucking desert, and I didn't want to get up to go for water to the kitchen. I finally decided to work up my fear and get up, and I walked to the kitchen for my glass of water, and saw something through the kitchen window. It was in my backyard, just creeping, looking around with a huge, stupid ear-to-ear grin. It didn't seem to have lips though, only teeth and these huge black round eyes. The next day, we were going to pack up our shat, and my uncle just stood there, looking at us, like if we were Muslims or something. When we were done packing our stuff, we were going to help them pack theirs, but he pushed my mom and grandma away, and said he was going to stay. My cousin was too scared to stay, so she left with my grandma. My uncle's funeral is this Tuesday. Even though he moved out of that house, he never was the same after that. His cause of death? He self-ended. My cousin is sleep deprived and I think she has a tulpa or at least a serious brain deprivation because she apparently talks to someone all the time, even though she has no friends or phone.
Be me. 16. Living in southeastern Texas. Went to high school football game to cheer on the team. It was an away game, so I rode the school buses there and back. Get back to my high school at midnight. The hour-long walk home commences. After about 20 minutes down the road, I have left civilization. Nothing but trees on both sides. Immediately feel like I'm being watched. Hear noises from just beyond the tree line. Twigs snapping and shit. Don't really think anything of it, but am on high alert because I know hogs are in the area. Noises getting closer. Listen intently. Suddenly hear a train down the tracks that are adjacent to the road. Don't see it and it never arrives, just makes noises. Getting really paranoid now because I can still hear twigs snapping and something moving, but I can't place its direction due to the train. Walk faster. Near the supposedly haunted graveyard on the left side of the road. People were worried about the graveyard because Hurricane Harvey had flooded it. The superstitious thought the spirits were distressed. Never really bought into it until this event. Near shitting myself because of fear. Suddenly, the train noise is gone. Twig snaps. Look in the direction of the noises. Face staring at me through the trees. Looks like a starving naked albino with an abnormally wide grin. Arms are a foot too long for its body. Skin pulled tight around its ribs. It walked along the tree line watching me. It moved like it was new to walking. Its eyes were glued to me and it never blinked. Started to move faster, but it picked up the pace too. Thought I heard my name being called. Looked away for a split second to find out who was calling me. Looked back and it was gone. Sprint home terrified. When I get outside of my neighborhood, hear a loud crash from the trees, but nothing is there. Sprint faster. When I get to my house, I realize that nobody is home. Losing my shit at this point. Rush to room and grab my rifle. Don't even try to sleep because I know I won't be able to. Think of playing video. Mere seconds after I turn on my TV, I hear a tapping at my window. Second story window. Grab rifle and slowly approach window. Throw open the curtains to see the face staring in at me. Shoulder the rifle to fire. It's gone. Sit in middle of room holding rifle tight against my body. Am about to fall asleep when I hear a voice from the other side of my door. Are you scared? Sounded human but not a familiar voice. Throw open my door to see that nobody is there. All the doors to my house are open and all the windows are unlocked. Close and lock my front door again and return to my room. Light is now off. Rush in with rifle. Turn on light. Nothing's there, but my wallet was open on my bed and my state ID was taken out and placed on top of it. Sit in center of room hugging my rifle till I pass out from exhaustion. My parents got to the house maybe an hour after I fell asleep. I don't know what it was or what it wanted, but I think it was just toying with me. I still see it in my dreams and wake up to tapping at my window. Don't even feel safe in my own bed.
I hope that you enjoyed tonight's broadcast. If you enjoyed tonight's story, then please subscribe to the channel as more Greentext will appear daily. A new broadcast will appear when the clock strikes midnight Central Time.
Oh